Let me set the scene for you. It's October 1973. The Golan Heights, this rugged, volcanic plateau on the Israeli-Syrian border, it's about to become a killing ground. We're talking about one of history's most savage tank battles, where a tiny group of defenders had to face an enemy force that was just unimaginable. This is the story of that fight.
Just listen to those words. That's from an Israeli tank commander trying to describe the sheer shock of that moment. A moment that would kick off a war that put the very survival of his country on the line.
All right, let's get into how this all went down. The date is October 6th, 1973. Now, you have to understand, this is Yom Kippur, the single holiest day in Judaism. Most Israeli soldiers are at home, they're fasting, and that means the border with Syria is dangerously, dangerously thin. It was, without a doubt, the perfect time for an ambush.
For months, Syria had been playing this clever game, massing troops for what they called drills, only to pull them back again. They basically lulled Israel into a false sense of security. But on this day, they didn't pull back. Around noon, an Israeli commander gets a chilling report. The Syrians are taking the camouflage nets off their artillery. And just 30 minutes later, all hell breaks loose. The bombardment begins. The surprise was absolute.
And just look at the force they brought to the party. The Syrian army had gathered a staggering 1,200 main battle tanks for their assault on the Golan, a massive wall of steel ready to punch right through the Israeli lines.
So, what was standing in their way? Just 170 understrength Israeli tanks. The difference is just brutal when you see it like this. We're talking odds of nearly 7-1. For the defenders on the ground, it must have looked like the end of the world. You know, in a situation like this, fighting head-on is just suicide. So the Israelis had to go with a classic David versus Goliath strategy. They knew they couldn't match the numbers, so they had to lean on superior tactics and, crucially, technology to try and fight from a distance. So let's break down the hardware. The Israeli Shot-Cal tank, it was an upgraded British Centurion, had this incredible British L7 cannon. Its big advantage? Unbelievable long-range accuracy. It was effective at over 3,600 meters. The Syrians' Soviet-made T-55s, on the other hand, were totally outranged. Their cannons were only effective to about 2,400 meters. So the Israeli game plan was simple. Kill the enemy before he can even get close enough to shoot back.
But here's the thing. That one crucial advantage, it was completely dependent on daylight. When the sun went down on that first day, the entire battle changed in a truly terrifying way.
You see, the Syrians had a key piece of Soviet tech that the Israelis didn't: infrared projectors. This meant their T-55s could see targets up to 1,200 meters away in total darkness. The Israelis had nothing like it. They were, for all intents and purposes, completely blind. It forced them to just fire into the night, hoping to create the illusion they were still in the fight.
Now, it's important to understand that the battle for the Golan was really like two separate wars happening at the same time. While a desperate, threadbare defense was just barely holding on in the mountainous north, the story in the flatter, more open terrain of the south was, well, it was very different and far more dangerous for Israel.
Down there, some aggressive Syrian commanders showed more initiative. They had their infantry literally fill in parts of the Israeli anti-tank ditch by hand. This let their tanks cross over and just use their overwhelming numbers to smash right through the thin defensive line, wiping out an entire Israeli tank battalion in the process.
This was the absolute nightmare scenario. Syrian armor was pouring through the gap. They were advancing across the Golan Plateau, and their objective, the key bridges over the Jordan River, was just kilometers away. The future of the whole country, really the whole region, was hanging by a thread.
Israel's only hope now came down to its legendary ability to mobilize its reserve forces. I mean, we're talking civilians from all walks of life, rushing from their homes and synagogues to depots, grabbing whatever gear they could, and racing to the front in this frantic, chaotic scramble against time.
And this right here shows a massive Syrian miscalculation. Their intelligence figured it would take Israel at least 20 hours to get fully mobilized. But the Israelis, who had perfected this art, did it in 10. Tanks were being rushed to the front so fast that many of them went into battle without their main cannons even being properly calibrated.
But then, something truly astonishing happened. With the bridges practically undefended and victory in their grasp, two Syrian brigade commanders halted their advance for the night. Maybe it was rigid Soviet doctrine, this idea that you don't deviate from the plan. Whatever the reason, this single inexplicable decision gave the 1st Israeli reserves just enough time to show up and form a new, desperate line of defense.
The war had now reached its breaking point. In the north, the few remaining Israeli tanks were getting ready for one last desperate showdown in a valley that was about to earn itself a tragic new name.
This is an actual, raw radio transmission from an Israeli commander up north. His forces were shattered. He was facing over 200 Syrian tanks with less than 30 of his own. In this do-or-die moment, he basically shamed his men into one final, what must have seemed like a suicidal, charge to retake some high ground.
The result was an absolute massacre. When the smoke cleared, Israeli observers counted the burning wrecks of 500 Syrian tanks in that narrow pass. From that day on, it would forever be known as the Valley of Tears. Well, the Syrian offensive was broken, and Israeli counterattack would soon push into Syria itself. But this victory, if you can even call it that, it came at an almost unbearable price for everyone involved.
Just look at the grim reality of these numbers, which cover the entire 16-day war on all fronts. Thousands of tanks just turned into burning hulks. But the real tragedy, of course, is the human cost. Across the whole conflict, over 20